Today we're taking a look at Warlord book for boys. This is the annual from 1991. It's put out by DC Thompson. So they had ceased publishing the weekly back in 1986, but they would still continue to publish an annual for a while. This one, obviously, even though it says 1991, it's printed, fall of 1990 and written before then. There is no table of contents, and I found these stories to be quite weak. I've read some older Warlord titles, and they're much better. I think the issue is the DC Thompson writers, they were on other titles, and they're stopped doing this weekly, and they're just, called in by their editors to write this just the one-off annual, and it doesn't feel like they put their heart and soul into it. So, codename Warlord, this is, what the Warlord is named after, their key figure in the title, and it's Lord Peter Flint, who's kind of a secret agent behind enemy lines commando, and the pacing just isn't that good. The idea is, though, here that the Germans have found out, they suspect that Peter Flint is a warlord, and they try and, take care of him on British soil. It's just the pacing wasn't that good. And then we got this here, Fire at Me, a different World War II story. And again, it's okay. I much prefer some of the Victor thing where you're not just getting war story after war story after war story. Yeah, and the problem is these ones, this is not Warlord at its height, at its peak, with really solid storytelling. I think this annual is a weaker one because the pacing on just a lot of these stories is off, and they're not particularly interesting. Whereas some of the older Warlord ones, I think when they were in the groove of writing this weekly and really getting into it, I think they could just write a better story. Additionally, they have this kind of continued on page. So right here we're on page 23. Sometimes you're like continued on a page because there's a little thing in the break, but no, it warps to a totally different story here, and it's continued on page 81. This Union Jack Johnson story, who's a British guy fighting with mostly American troops. So, okay, that's a neat novel concept, but it's just not executed that well this time. Here, you got Harrier Squadron. We're set all the way in the far, far future of 2003. And the idea is there's this kind of vengeance from a breakaway kind of Soviet republic. And just the pacing's all wrong. They are not giving the story enough time to really grow and breathe. And if you just have a few pages, you've got to do a different story. Again, this one's pretty interesting. This Saber Squadron, set in Central America with different guerrillas. But again, we come to a thing where it's broken off. So you go from page 40 to page 97, means you got to scroll through the book, try and find where it is. It's just annoying. I know, sometimes the weekly would do that from a front ender to a back ender, but it's different in an annual. We got a nice rescue boats on, how crew were saved in the sea from these different rescue planes. That's nice. You've got here the Moroccan scout Goom. This was actually a pretty solid story. The pacing here was good. I liked the art, and it worked. That story definitely worked here. Sergeant Raker, kind of a black sergeant, enduring some racism during the war, how he's got to deal with that, and again, I just hate this breakup where it's page 55 continued on page 74, and then you flipping through the book trying to find that right if you want to go back to it or not. again, you have a 2-page break for one of these interludes. That's fine. I just didn't like the way they were doing this. Here, kind of a World War II tale again, set in Burma. As you can see, it gets kind of repetitive with a lot of World War II tales, which, that's fine, but I want a little bit more variety if I'm reading, kind of one of these anthology annuals. And you've got kind of an upper crust aristocrat. He's having, his billiard table air dropped in to Burma, and just that kind of humor. But again, it's just not that particularly interesting, not that well written, this tale here. We're back to Codename Warlord. And again, this is their flagship character, and they just can't get the pacing right on this. It's interesting. There's some interesting action scenes. Art's pretty decent, but it's just, take out one of your weaker titles and give this one a little bit more page, or tailor a story to the page count that you've got. We just saw we did 2 Warlord stories. I'd rather have just one long one. We've got enough time to grow it. And then here we continue with Raker the Sergeant. And again, it's just annoying skipping around the continuation of Union Jack Johnson. And it's a pretty decent story, but I just really don't like the breakup of the story. Last Stand at Kidney Ridge, a nice true war story. You got Iron Annie here, and this is actually a pretty decent story, well written, from the Eastern Front. You go back, you finish that Saber Squadron, set in kind of guerrilla counterinsurgency in Central America. A decent story there. More interludes that are pretty good. I like these kind of splash pages where you're learning some facts. This one, this is a World War II story. This one's actually quite good. This has a new kid kind of assigned to the squadron. His father is high up in the military, so it feels like he's being given a break. Doesn't seem like he's that good of a pilot, but then by the end we realize he'd actually earned it, and it's quite a good story. This, I think, that's probably the best, most well-written, well-paced story in the book. We then got another Eastern Front story with some Germans. You've got a good German who's kind of protesting some of the, depravities of war, what the SS are up to. And, that makes a fairly interesting story here, especially about, being ordered to clear landmines using, people. Quite the war crime. Interesting story. And that is well-paced as well. And then another... Pacific Theater story. What I do appreciate is so often the Pacific Theater is neglected in these kind of tales. In this book, Warlord is dedicating quite a bit to it, and this is a pretty decent story about a native guide helping them out. One guy gets blinded and how they resolve it. So overall, it's a pretty good book. It's not as strong as some of the other Warlord titles. So earlier on, I think while Warlord was being published as a weekly, their annuals were much stronger. And additionally, you're just reading war tale after war tale after war tale. I kind of do prefer a little bit of a break, more of a variety of stories. And again, as you could see, this is a vast majority of the stories are just World War II. Having a break and variety there would have been nicer. Seeing something Napoleonic or something different would be nice. But it's still worth picking up if you like war stories. You can find this cheap enough that I think you will find some value. Till next time.